Welcome to the ProVideo Pages podcast, where we discuss practical marketing and business tips, advice, and education that you can implement in your business to improve your bottom line. I'm your host, Ann Gussiff. My guest today is Linda Wesley, owner of StoryPath Communications. Linda is an expert in communication strategy and content development. Linda, my favorite line from your website is communicating at the intersection of story and strategy. So I do want to hear about that, but first I want to hear a little bit about how you got started in the business and how you got started in the business.
Sure. My educational background was in journalism. And so I went to journalism school, but I always knew I wanted to apply that to broader marketing, and then ended up working in the marketing industry in corporations, in public schools, and in public health. And then decided in 2014 that it was just time to start my own business. So I come from a family of entrepreneurs.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, that quote from my website you mentioned about the intersection of story and strategy is tied to that. My grandparents were business owners. My dad owned his own engineering firm. So he owned a civil engineering firm. And so that intersection word was sort of chosen as a nod to that because he's a traffic engineer. So, and then, my brothers at different times owned their own businesses as well. And so I just decided that it was time to go out on my own also. I originally started working with or wanting to work exclusively with nonprofits. Everything I had done through my career, all of the employee roles I had held were related to a service type of industry. And so when I started my own business, I wanted to really focus on nonprofit. But I quickly learned as I got in and started networking and meeting people that small business owners needed that help too. They needed the clarity, they needed the strategy, and they needed the support the same way that nonprofits did. So I quickly expanded to both nonprofits and small business owners.
Great. Tell me a little bit about the services that you provide.
Yeah. So what I offer falls kind of into two buckets. There's a strategy bucket and there is a content bucket for what I offer. So strategy can be everything from a full scope communications plan development, and looking at everything about that organization, looking at their messages, looking at their audience, looking at their channels, and then talking about what can they do. And then also smaller strategies. So something like a half-day strategy session where we really focus in on one component of strategy and work through that with the organization. And then also strategy into their different channels. So social media strategy, blog strategy, email marketing, et cetera. So strategy covers, obviously it's embedded in everything that I do, but there's the strategy piece and then there's the content piece. And so on the content piece, I have a team of freelance writers and we work on monthly recurring content for social, for blogs, for email. I also write website content. It's one of my favorite things to write, is work on website content. And any other writing and editing that an organization might need to make sure that message is clear when it gets to their audience.
So based on what you've told me, how would I spot your ideal client? What are they dealing with? Do they have any pain points that you can see from the outside? What are they feeling?
A lot of times what they're feeling is a lack of clarity. They don't feel like they have clarity around who they're trying to reach. They don't feel like they have clarity around what they're trying to say. And they're looking for that clarity. They want the investment they make in any of their, marketing channel, communication channels. They want that to be fruitful, right? And so they want that greater clarity so that they're consistent with their message over time. Sometimes they don't know who they're trying to reach, and we can dive into their audience and talk about that. But really, it all comes back to that clarity around their message and the clarity around how they communicate.
That makes so much sense. And from the earlier conversations that we've had, part of why we get along, I think, is because we both think strategically and get our clients to think strategically as well. So tell me about why it's important to have a communication strategy versus someone just hiring somebody to write some blogs for them or to write their website content.
Absolutely. It's such a great question. And I know it's a question that's on the mind of a lot of business owners. Why does this matter? I use an analogy about abstract art. So bear with me. And if anybody watching is, an abstract artist, I don't know as much about your field, but bear with me on this analogy. So if you think about it, if you don't have any training in art, but you say, I want to create an abstract art canvas and I want to take a canvas and I'm going to pick 10 colors of paint and I'm just going to throw them at that canvas. Now, if you're working with a true abstract artist who's trained in art, they probably have a plan, but the average person who's going in may not have much of a plan for what that end result's going to look like. You're going to add paint somewhat at random until you get something that you like. And it might be beautiful. It probably is beautiful. It's beautiful to you when you're done with it. But if you have someone else look at it, they're not clear what it's supposed to mean. So everyone's interpretation is going to be a little bit different. On the flip side, if you were taking that same canvas and you were taking those same 10 colors and you said, I want to paint a picture of a sailboat, and you sketch it out and you have a little bit of a plan for where your boat's going to be, where your water is going to be, where the buildings in the background are going to be. When you get done with that art, the people who view it are going to have a much better idea of what it is. It's going to be clear that it's a sailboat. And so that's the analogy I use for why a communication strategy matters, that you have to go in with that plan. You have to understand your audience. You have to understand your message and be really clear about your message so that when it's viewed or heard, because it can be spoken out loud, of course. So when it's viewed or heard, it's more clear to your audience and it's more consistent from one person to the next.
I love that. And it's interesting because you were explaining that, I was just thinking about how some marketing tactics, if you miss, you might miss landing where your prospective client can see it. But if your message does get close to where they are and they see it and hear it, and it's not clear, that can have a negative effect where they just go, I don't think she knows what she's doing, or I don't think I see a connection to her working with me. And then they leave. And so it can be very negative if your messaging isn't clear and it's not talking to the right audience or saying what it's supposed to say to attract them to take that next step.
Absolutely.
So this actually, I'm so excited because this is not just a one-time thing. We are going to be recording your topic, how to create a communications plan for your business. And so I'd love for you to share what we're going to cover. Just tell a little bit about that.
Absolutely. So in the webinar, we're really going to get into what are the steps you need to take to create a communications plan. What are the things you need to do to think more strategically about your audience, about your message? And so we're going to walk through some key questions around defining your audience, around developing your message, and then thinking about your channels and thinking about what you need to do next and how you prioritize. Because that's a huge factor for every business owner, right? Where do you put your priority? Where do you put your time? Are you starting in the right place? Or are you trying to start 3 steps in before you have clarity around your audience and clarity around your message? And so we'll really walk through, the how-to. And so that if somebody wants to walk out of this webinar and block a day on their calendar and write this all out for their business, they'll be able to do that.
Great. That's one of the important things, by the way, about these webinars. We've discussed this, is that everything that you're going to share in here is something that somebody can take away and implement on their own. They don't have to hire you or hire somebody else to write the content. I love, by the way, that you're addressing strategy and you're addressing the prioritization of time. We have only so much time and we have only so much budget of money to put into our marketing as well. And so we've discussed this too, by the way, that, I do marketing strategy with clients as a standalone, and somebody wouldn't need to do both my strategy and your strategy. Yours happens to really lead somebody to the messaging and the clarity of their message that they're communicating to their clients. And mine is a little bit broader. But what is both so important is that this concept of thinking strategically so that your messaging lands and actually gets people to take action. What would you say to that? What would you add there?
I agree wholeheartedly that there are a lot of different avenues you can take for digging into your strategy. There's a lot of different steps. There's different philosophies around communications. There's different philosophies around marketing. And sometimes it's not right or wrong. It's simply what's the best fit for you, and really digging into your business and looking at what your options are and then moving forward. But as long as you're doing that strategically, you're asking the right questions and you're putting the right plan in place, you're going to be so much better off than if you're just haphazard with the way that you're communicating about your business or the way that you're throwing marketing out into the world.
Great. Is there anything else that you want to add about your presentation? I know you've made this or given this presentation before. Before we wrap up, is there anything that you'd like to say on that?
We'll also talk a little bit about measurement, which I think is important. And it's an easy step to skip to look at measurement. Again, business owners and small nonprofits are so busy. You're wearing all the hats, you're doing all the things. And so we will also talk a little bit, how do you measure your communication plan? How do you know that what you're doing is working? How can you assess where your messaging is landing with your audience? And some practical ways and some little ways so that small businesses can do that, because there are certainly measurement tools out there that are more cost prohibitive, that are maybe used by larger organizations. But we'll talk about some of the smaller practical ways that you can measure your effectiveness as well.
Great. Thank you. I love that too. And marketing isn't always easy to measure. And I will be having somebody come on to dive into that more, because with measuring your marketing, some of it is you have to go with your gut. Some things are easy to measure when it's numbers. Others, you don't know how many impressions you're getting on something. You don't know how many people, if you're reaching the right audience. So it's a balance, right?
For sure. Always a balance.
Yeah. Well, as we wrap up here, I have a couple questions for you. The first one is, what is the coolest thing that you do, or what makes you happiest when you work with a client, when you just go, oh, I'm in the right spot?
I love that moment where the light bulb goes off. So I'm working with them on strategy, working with them on talking through their audience, their message, their channels, and asking questions, because it really is just asking a lot of questions and helping them get that clarity through the process. And then there's always that moment where there's an aha, right? There's that light bulb that goes off, and all of a sudden they realize, oh, I've been saying this, but if I say this, it's so much more powerful. And so that's one of my absolute favorite parts, is watching that process happen.
I love that. And you know what that gets me thinking is that for anybody who's working with a small business, the small business owner they're not a big company. They don't have, full-time staff in all these different positions typically. Some of them do, but even then, the person might be wearing more than one hat. And I like to think that we have the opportunity to get people to think differently and think like a marketer, or like a writer, or like a strategist. So it really is influencing people to take action in their business to help their bottom line, but as well get them thinking in a way that's going to stick with them. So it's like a filter almost. Okay, final question. So with so many tools coming into the market for small business owners and service professionals, it can be overwhelming. But what is one tool or one approach that you take that you cannot imagine doing business without?
Yeah, AI has been huge. It's something that we just all keep talking about, right? Because there are so many tools, and some that are very well known, some that are lesser known, and it is absolutely overwhelming. But my tool I can't live without is actually not specifically AI. We've been using it for a little while. It now has layers of AI. So that's the other thing, is we're seeing that AI influence on a lot of different tools. But my tool I can't live without is called ClickUp. So click and then UP. And it is a project management tool. And so we use it to keep all of our projects on track. It has a lot of automations built in for how you can automate what happens with tasks when you change its status and all that sort of thing. So we use it internally. We keep all of our projects. We have templates for the different types of projects. We can always see on a dashboard where are things, what needs attention, what's next. I even use it some in my personal life. So I keep the most, home project, life projects on task. I have reminders set for things that only happen once a year, that kind of thing. So I love ClickUp. I tell a lot of people about it. It's not a widely known project management tool. There are certainly some out there in the market that are better known. ClickUp has a very robust free version too. So it kind of aligns with the clarity message, right? Like if you're looking for more clarity around what's happening in your business, it's a great tool to use, and it's not exclusive to marketing agencies. That's how I use it. But there are certainly a lot of different businesses that could use it to just keep everybody on the same page and on track. And it's been interesting to see the AI layers that they're adding to that. Interested to see what happens next with it, and just see what other AI tools are out there on the market. And if I can, I would also just say on AI,
Mm-hmm.
you mentioned that shiny object syndrome. And I would encourage people, like, don't go down the rabbit hole too much of shiny object. Find the tool that works for you. There's a lot of options. And so it's really important to start with asking, what do you really need it to do? It doesn't
Mm-hmm.
have to be the tool everybody else is using, but like, what's the most important thing that most important problem you're looking to solve? And then which tool helps you solve that problem the best? And it doesn't have to be the latest and greatest. It might be one that's been on the market longer. It might be one that other people have never heard of. But it just, start with what matters most to you and then go from there and find the tool. And that can help eliminate some of the shiny object syndrome sometimes.
I think that's a great idea. I was talking to somebody recently and they were saying that basically they were saying that wait 3 months and see if it's still something you want to jump into. That would be for somebody who tends to buy a lot of tools, because that can really cloud what you're thinking and thinking, how do I implement this tool in my business? And another is, don't buy the annual subscription right away. Go month to month until you're sure that it works for you. And just so you know, a lot of people try tools and get rid of them because you just don't know. But when you do get a tool, make sure you try to use it. And like you were saying, Linda, think about what that main reason is that you're using the tool, and make sure that it solves that problem for you. So, well, thank you so much, everyone, for listening to the ProVideo Pages podcast. And Linda, I really look forward to continuing to work with you and recording your webinar and getting your message out there about how to create a communications plan for your business. So stay tuned for additional information on that. I will have Linda's information below, and you can find her at StoryPathCommunications.com. And again, thank you, Linda, for joining us.
Thank you so much, Anne.
If you found this valuable and you're thinking to yourself, I need to create some video content for my business, but I'm not confident I could pull it off professionally enough. That's literally what we help people with at ProVideo Pages. No pressure, but if you want to see how we make this ridiculously simple for busy professionals, just check out the link in the description and reach out.